There's no shortage of information that can impact the way you invest. And I'm here along with my guests to get to the important part. I'm Liz Thomas, host of The Important Part, Investing with Liz Thomas. As head of investment strategy at SoFi, I share insights and perspectives that cover everything happening in the world of money. Now let's get to it. This episode is about how to plan for big liquidity events, more specifically, something like a wedding. Some of you may know I recently got married myself, so this is a fresh topic for me. And I think it's really important to talk about the conflict between managing your investment and financial planning during an emotional decision that requires a lot of cash. Over the past few years, the wedding planning industry has changed a lot. We've had shifts in economic conditions, increased demand post-pandemic, shifts in generational preferences, and all of this has combined to make things way more complicated. In this episode, we're going to talk about the tools available to you to help you make smart decisions when you're feeling excited and emotional. Whether you're planning a wedding or another big liquidity event, this episode is important. My guest today is Tim Chi. Tim is CEO at The Knot Worldwide, a company that helps couples plan and plan for their weddings. Before The Knot, Tim built a company called WeddingWire. It was a global vendor marketplace for all things wedding. Tim and his co-founders took WeddingWire from 4 desks in a living room to 1,000 employees all around the world. In 2019, WeddingWire Inc. merged with XO Group Inc., and Tim became CEO of The Knot Worldwide. Tim, welcome to The Important Part.
Thanks for having me on the show, Liz.
I am delighted to have you here. I don't know if you know, but I recently got married, which was some of the impetus for this episode. I got married in May, June-ish. We had multiple events, which, as you can imagine, racked up the costs very, very quickly. And we needed to come up with a lot of liquidity very quickly. So that is why we are here today to talk about those big liquidity events and how people can plan for them better, invest better on their way there, and understand the trade-offs and the decisions that they have to make. But what I think would be useful for our listeners is give us more of a glimpse into your background. So we talked about what you did before this with WeddingWire. What brought you into the wedding industry in general?
Sure, Liz. So like many entrepreneurs, I was engaged at the time. So in 2005, I was engaged to my wife, current still wife, Tracy. And, what was interesting to me at the time was, if you can remember back to the sort of early 2000s, I call it the rise of the vertical marketplaces. There was a phenomenon going on in tech where you had companies like Yelp and TripAdvisor, Zillow, et cetera, come up. And the commonality between all of those was they were rooted in user-generated content, and specifically a lot of reviews around businesses or, other products and services. And so marrying, pun intended, that with my experience, I was kind of just feeling like the wedding industry itself could use a solution that helps engaged couples figure out, this photographer, are they the right one for me? And at that time, without user-generated reviews, without newlywed reviews, you didn't really know what you were getting, right? And so we and 3 of my co-founders set out to build a local marketplace to really aggregate those reviews and really help engaged couples make more informed decisions about all the amazing wedding professionals they're going to bring to their big day.
I love that. And I mean, you were ahead of the game in a lot of ways and in a lot of industries. I think that exists in many industries now, but we're recording this in 2024. If we're talking about the early 2000s, or some people call it the early aughts, I suppose. So the early 2000s, that didn't exist, particularly in niche industries where it was, just the one-day event. So you were ahead of the game. It sounds like maybe the trendsetter and, the first website. So how did it mature, and how did that part of the industry change as time went on? I imagine it got more competitive.
Certainly a lot of competition in the wedding space, but at the same time, you have to remember weddings themselves, as you just went through, Liz, they're very local at the end of the day, right? You show up, all your friends and family come into town. And so what that allowed us to do from a business perspective is grow our business city by city, locale by locale. So we didn't have to launch an overnight platform that serviced every engaged couple, all 2 million in the domestic United States. We started where I live right now in Washington, D.C. And we tried to find engaged couples. We tried to find newlyweds. We talked to all of the wedding professionals in the area, and we said, why don't we do this in Washington, D.C.? If this works here, let's expand to Baltimore, let's expand to Philly, let's expand to New York. And so it really was a journey over the past almost 2 decades. I'd say it took us about 10 years to sort of get fully national, where we would just, landing and expanding into different geographies.
Is that the number? So at any given time, there are 2 million engaged couples in the United States?
There's 2 million weddings annually in the
Wow.
in the United States. Yes.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about it. Maybe that's an average year. Back in 2022 started to be looked at as the Super Bowl of weddings. It was this big pandemic rush because people had to cancel or postpone. And then 2022 came and everybody could do it again. You could have weddings in person, and it was very, very exciting. So let's talk about what that looked like for the Knot. Number one, I imagine that was a huge time of opportunity for your business, but also maybe new challenges were presented because of the pandemic, because of how the world had changed, and because of all this remote sort of activity that we started to have.
Yeah, it was certainly a Super Bowl of weddings is the right way to characterize it. 2.6 million weddings happened in 2022
Okay. Wow.
by our count. And certainly it obviously felt great, I think, for an industry to be able to get back in person and be in person and celebrate these important events. At the same time, most weddings, right, happen on Fridays and Saturdays and some Sundays in the spring and in the fall. So when you really do the math, it was actually quite supply constrained in terms of just dates that were available. So we started to see a lot of Monday weddings, a lot of Thursday weddings, some Tuesday weddings. There just simply was too much demand to soak up all of the supply that was pent up from the pandemic. And so the challenges were, what do you do with this? How are we as a company and industry guiding couples? Because they didn't want to wait another 2 years until 2024, 2025 to actually get married. They'd postponed it for 2 years already. And so that was really some of the challenges that we were helping the industry navigate.
Exactly. They had waited a long time already. And then I think it was during that same period where we had this rush of experiences as consumers too. Everybody wanted to go to concerts. Every concert was sold out. Every tour was sold out. Every flight was sold out. It was like, oh my gosh, we haven't been able to interact and do normal stuff for so long. So now we're just going to do that. And we went through this period of what my industry categorizes as revenge spending, right? It was like, I've been pent up. I've been locked up in my house for way too long. And now I'm just going to buy everything that I can and do everything that I want, even if I can't afford it. And I wonder if that happened in the wedding industry too. And one of the things that we found on the Knot, there was a study that was conducted by you guys in June of this year called the 2024 Global Wedding Report. I'm sure there's a lot of different data in there, but what it said was that the average ceremony and reception was $35,000. So that's together $35,000, which is that's bonkers to me. My first job out of college, I made $30,000 for the whole year, and my first raise was $600 for the whole year. So people are spending on one day more than my entire first year's salary. So that seems like it's up over the past decade or so. But was there even an uptick post-COVID? Was there revenge wedding spending?
I'd say yes and no. Yes to all of that you just said around the cost of weddings generally, $35,000. COVID itself, through the pandemic, the sort of lows and the highs, created a lot of swirl and a lot of thrash. Really hard to read through exactly what's going to be real and not. And we're sitting here in 2024 right now, and sensing a couple new trends. I'll cover a couple of them. Number one, that healing that you mentioned around wanting experiences, experiential travel, revenge travel, whatever you want to call it, 110%. What a better way after being, locked up in the pandemic to actually celebrate the most important moment of life with close friends, with family, with loved ones. I mean, it's the perfect reason to go travel and kind of have a blowout. And so certainly we saw that. We see that in the numbers, in that the average dollars spent per guest is still elevated even in 2024. Okay. And we can talk about how that factors into the budget, but I think the point is engaged couples really want guests to have a good time. We saw that coming out of the pandemic, and that has stuck around. It is about creating an experience, and the measure of success is is everyone going to remember this? Is this going to be a lot of fun when we were able to all come together and, be in person?
Well, so this is going to be a really hard question to answer, but from an investment mindset, we think about it as ROI. What's the return on investment, right? And for a wedding or any big event, any big liquidity event, whether it's a wedding or sending a kid to college, obviously that lasts longer than a wedding day, but it's still a concentrated period of time. It's one purchase, right? Mm-hmm. How do you think about, or how would you coach couples to think about what is the ROI on this? You're going to outlay $35,000 on this day. What are you getting back? You're not getting 10% a year back on that money, right? So there's no tangible way to measure that. And I think this, whatever way that you want to answer this question, I think it might help people frame, how do I think about these big cash outlays and not let it make me sick to my stomach, right? Especially when the benefits are intangible, and maybe it's a benefit to the guests. Maybe that's what gives people the most happiness.
Personally, I would summarize it as, well, there's three things. Number one is the pandemic just reminded us how important creating memories, memorable experiences matters to us as humans. And so this is not a wedding specific example, but I think just when you look across the way that we're behaving now and wanting to get in person, but not just for the sake of getting in person, but really connection and creating memories, that in some ways the pandemic sort of just rekindled that and helped us connect with that again. As it relates to weddings and ROI, I mean, this is the event you've always been dreaming for. And for that reason, we've always found the industry globally relatively, you can call it recession resistant, right? People still figure out a way to spend. Now, the dreaming part is always there. It's always been there. Will always continue to be there. You're sort of touching on there's a pragmatic part to managing a budget as well and managing the cost. We have tons of tips on our site on how to do it, but I think the big things to remember are connecting the dots on the budget part. You can really be mindful of things of cost in terms of planning early, setting your budget, being realistic about it, relying on your vendors who are the professionals who can help you do things like if you're engaged if you're talking with a florist and you really want these types of wedding flowers, they can suggest real ways of saving money. Like, hey, do you know these flowers are in season? They're a little cheaper than the ones that maybe you want. So relying on your vendors. And then ultimately, it's all about prioritization. Like everything in life, the wedding itself is a series of, 42 different purchase decisions that are combined together. You can prioritize what's most important to you. What are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves? And in doing so, you can really find a budget that works and still make an amazing experience, an authentic experience that doesn't feel compromised in any way.
Well, and the experience that I just had too, obviously we worked with vendors, we worked with the florist, all the traditional things, right? But there are some things that you just don't see at weddings anymore. And I'm realizing as we're having this conversation, a lot of those things that you don't see anymore, or maybe a better way to put it is, I didn't do a bouquet toss. We didn't do a cake cutting and do that all in front of everybody. We didn't do a first dance. Yeah. So, and that was partly because of the venue, but partly because we just didn't want to. But actually, what I'm realizing is the things that have been eliminated from traditional wedding receptions are actually the things that were more focused on the couple, right? The cake cutting is for us. The first dance is for us. Yeah. The bouquet toss is for me to show off flowers, right? It's not necessarily as focused on the guests. So you eliminate some of that self stuff and put the focus on what's your experience like. So then I guess my question would be, obviously priorities have changed for couples. And I think that's great. I mean, you're a wedding guest more often than you're in the wedding yourself, right? So I would prefer to have a great time as a guest. But what do you think, what are the aspects that, regardless of how priorities have changed, what are the aspects of the planning process or the cost management process that couples consistently get wrong or that they underestimate and they are unpleasantly surprised by later?
It all starts with the moment you're engaged. It's not like you have typically done this before. So expectations around what it actually costs, we generally find are just off because how would you know, right? This isn't the 20th wedding that you've planned for yourself. And so we think a lot about, and you really want to try to help close the gap between just an initial anchor expectation around what it costs to have this and the reality of what it costs, of which we have a ton of data about. So We offer a lot of tools on the Knot, our budget tool, checklist, et cetera. But a lot of it is geared towards, and we really want to lean in here and help couples really set a realistic budget. That would be the first thing, is just the anchor point on where we're starting is generally not aligned to what the actual cost is. And, we mentioned the $35,000 number earlier. It is important to note that is an average. Costs really do range quite a bit, right? Based on where you're located. Number of guests is a huge driver in the actual cost. 20-person wedding and a 300-person wedding, you're just going to have a different budget, even if everything else is the same. Amount of food, size of the space, et cetera. So guest count does have a big input into the overall budget as well. And that's a very personal decision. We've been seeing a lot of people opt into more intimate ceremonies and receptions and sort of have a smaller guest list with the same budget, which means an up-leveled, really fun experience. So again, you can make it personal, and there's a lot of attributes and parameters to work with.
So you mentioned already weddings are recession resistant. I'm curious, because we haven't had another recession since COVID. So I'm curious to know, how do you think inflation has affected weddings? Because that's obviously been something that all of us have dealt with across the board a number of different ways, whether it's just buying groceries or even travel, everything, right? We've dealt with inflation for the better part of the last 2 years. And I continue to make this point. This is just for my economic friends out there. Inflation, the prices have not come down. The rate of growth of inflation has come down, but it's still growing. As long as that inflation number is positive, no prices have come down. So, I think that's been a very big misunderstanding, where people are hearing, okay, inflation has come down, therefore I should be able to be paying less for stuff. That's not how it works. We need deflation in order for you to be paying less for things. But exactly. So no costs have actually been reduced. It's just they stopped going up as quickly. Yeah. So for the wedding industry, has there been much of an effect? Or is it because this is such an important day to people that they're like, you know what, I don't care, I'm still going to spend it? Or are you seeing trade-offs and patterns in people giving up certain things in favor of others and having to make tough choices?
We have seen that only 1 in 10 are actually decreasing budget. Everybody's mind, when you say is inflation impacting or impacting how you think about wedding buying, nearly everybody, right? How can you not? But in terms of actual behavior, only 1 in 10 are decreasing budgets right now. And what they are doing, though, is within that budget, they are looking more surgically at, because costs have risen, as you would. And remember, a lot of weddings is labor under the hood as well, too, right? Labor costs. And so if you want your budget to be the same, you can't afford everything, where are you going to give some stuff up? And this gets back to the prioritization point I mentioned earlier. For some, it might be the cake. For some, might it be the foods. For some, might it be, the entertainment or photography or whatever. So that prioritization and then figuring out what's left, there are lots of other ways to do that, to sort of round it out so that your budget is not decreasing, but you don't feel like you're compromising on the experience. The other avenue that we've seen very popular as well is actually, as I mentioned earlier, just guest count, right? I think the average guest count size decreased by 30 guests over the past couple of years. And again, it's just another way to continue to hold the total budget while sort of prioritizing what's important to you. So that's the behavior that we've seen.
So guest count reduced by 30 people because each person costs more, which gives maybe you new meaning more to having to tier your friends and decide you're a tier 1 friend, you're a tier 2 friend, you don't get to come to this.
A-list, the A-list,
yeah.
B-list.
Oh my. So that's interesting though. That's good to know. Okay. So a couple other things, not necessarily new in the past couple of years. First thing that has been around for a while, but social media. So new since you started the Knot, right? Or at least much more influential since the Knot began. And because there are more competitors out there, I won't mention their names in front of you, at least not while looking directly at you, but there are competitors out there now, and some of them, newer entrants. And it's always a question of, is the first mover advantage really still a thing? Or are there competitors that can come in and do it better, faster, cheaper, and take your share. So one of the ways that I imagine you have to be ultra competitive is on social media, especially given the age of your target audience. If you've got Gen Z and millennials as the ones who are getting married right now. I mean, I'm on the oldest end of millennial. They call me a geriatric millennial. So the younger end of millennials, which would be my sister, she just got married in the last 5 years or so. So those types of things, if that's the audience you want to get in front of, they get most of their inspiration. They get a lot of their information, even their investing information, from social media. So you have to be present in that space. How have you pivoted to make sure that you can have that kind of presence?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And it's, on one hand, it's been really good because as we're a company with large brands in the wedding space in the 16 countries we operate in, social media is an incredible channel for us to continue to build brand and reach our audience and bring them to our site. On the other hand, as you mentioned too, a lot of people are finding their inspiration, and it is a good avenue to begin that journey of wedding planning. The thing that I'd highlight and how we're different and how we continue to really invest behind driving differentiation is you can spend a lot of time on social media grabbing ideas. At some point, as I mentioned earlier, weddings are local. You need to show up somewhere and walk the venue and make sure that the photographer knows where to shoot. I mean, you need to know how much it costs. You need to know if the floors is available or not. That is where we shine. We're really focused on connecting the inspiration, of which we offer, but you can get in a lot of places, to making it actually happen, decisioning and doing. We still feel like that is where we can add a lot of value. And so project management tools, staying organized, guest list management, figuring out whether these three venues you're looking at is within your budget. Are these photographers available? That's where we're going to continue to shine and invest our resources, because we don't think that's going away anytime soon.
All right. The other thing that's probably new, and tell me your take on this, both for the knot and for maybe the vendors, AI. There's been this huge AI boom, right? Some might call it an AI bubble. We still, at least in the investment community, are trying to figure out where is the ROI from AI. There's been a lot of optimism about it, a lot of companies that have traded much higher on the future prospects of AI, but we haven't yet entirely figured out the use cases and where the profit comes from. And when the rubber hits the road, what does it actually do? And if I have it in my phone, what am I doing with it in my phone? All of those things, a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And maybe you can draw from your experience in the early 2000s when the internet was literally new to many industries. So first part of the question would be, have you seen AI start to become a part of the wedding industry? Mm-hmm. If so, how so? And then the second part of the question is, how long does it take for a new technology like that to really find its way and find ways of efficiency in a new industry? I mean, this is a years-long process, and I think people are impatient right now, but any insight you can offer on that front?
It's a great topic, and when we think about it a lot, I remember, when ChatGPT was released, we sort of, just with the benefit of hindsight, we went through this like AI hype cycle, right? Where every company was like, oh my God, is this an extinction level event for my industry or my company, et cetera, et cetera. And, we were part of that group. We were thinking a lot about it. Fast forward now, what we're doing is, and I think that I saw this term floating around. I really liked it. I don't know if it's going to stick or not, but I saw this term called applied AI. So like, really, how is it being used in very practical applications today? Not, robots that are running around your house and, talking to you and giving you advice, but like really practical implementations. That is where we're fishing right now. So let me give you an example. We rolled out as a leading review site. You could imagine when you're as an engaged couple, you're trying to decide between a couple caterers. There's on our site now, they may have 50, 100, 200, 400 reviews. Yes, it's meaningful to mean through them, but we've been doing AI generated review summaries like TripAdvisor and other places. And okay, so that sounds cool. Does it matter is the question. And we are seeing that these AI generated storefront reviews, um, the conversion rate to the willingness for a couple to contact you because they sort of get everything compacted together, they pull out the right sentiment, is higher than those without. So there's applied AI. I like that concept because it's really showing up in the numbers that this very small use case is having a meaningful impact on the consumer experience, and which is translating into better connections to our vendors. So again, just one example of how we think about it.
Okay, so one of the last questions I have, and I'm going to try to draw a parallel here. One of the largest questions that many investors, individual investors, ask themselves is, do I want to do this myself? Meaning, do I want to go on a brokerage platform and DIY my trading? Or do I want to get a financial advisor? Maybe some mix of both, right? So in this case, let's consider a financial advisor a vendor.
Okay.
And let's consider the DIY approach.
Right.
I'm making my own centerpieces. I'm having my cousin play the guitar instead of hiring a DJ, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you, when couples are going through this process, how do you advise them, or how would you talk about them thinking about different vendors and whether or not they want to do something themselves or have somebody else do it for them? Obviously, there's a convenience factor in having somebody else do it for them, but there's also an added cost. And sometimes that can be a very large delta, right? That cost can be very high. So, and especially, and this goes back to the conversation about technology, I mean, it used to be the only way you could have music at a venue was to have a DJ because nobody else had the equipment. You needed the speakers, you needed the whatever they did. I don't know. I'm going to call them turntables and really date myself. But they had the stuff to make the music come out, right? And they had the lights and they all the things that they had and the smoke machines and the fans and all of it. But now you can create a playlist on Spotify and plug it in to some speakers. Who needs a DJ, right? So, but then you don't have anybody there if there's a tech issue. You don't have anybody there doing the MC, all of that.
Right.
Yeah. So, and full disclosure, we had a DJ, but me and the DJ put together a playlist on Spotify, right? So, and he used that as his inspiration. So we did some blend of both. And the DJ was also a friend of ours. So we did some blend of both, partly because we wanted it to be more intimate and we wanted to showcase his talent. But also, it's like you don't really need all that stuff anymore. So this decision, I think, has become harder and harder for couples, especially as technology has advanced.
My advice would be this, right? I think it's best to think about the process of planning this most important event in your life as a bucket of multiple decisions, and not every decision within that, whether it's selecting your DJ or your venue or photographer, do you need to have the same frame of reference? So it gets back to the prioritization. There's probably, your non-negotiables, your 3 to 5 to 7 things that, and look, my advice, I'd hire the professional. They've been doing this for a long time. Go for it, right? Really rely on the professionals to do this. Now, if there's something that's a nice to have, maybe something a little more intimate, something, then, and everyone's going to have their different sets of how they do this. But I think you can find, there's enough room to play with here, particularly as you think about cost overall, to find that balance. And again, it'll be very personal for each couple. But I would go, I've seen this enough times where, you want to rely on professionals wherever you can. They've been doing this for a long time. They're the experts. But there's such a wide range of decisions and things that get done that there's quite a lot of room to play with.
And totally anecdotal. One of the things that I've heard is if you're going to splurge on anything, splurge on your reception entertainment, because that's what's going to make the night. So if you want that more expensive DJ, but you're hemming and hawing about the extra couple $1,000s, just spend the extra couple $1,000s and forego something else, because that's what you're going to remember.
That's what you're going to remember. Yeah.
And that's what your guests are going to remember, right? Nobody likes an empty dance floor. So that's an important thing to note. And then the other anecdotal piece that I have, and this is very anecdotal, even just today, I was talking to a friend and she told me that she's been married for, I think, a decade. And they forgot to pick up their wedding video from the photographer. And now she's like, I don't even know how to find it. So they had a videographer, never even picked up the video. And you know what? They've been just fine without it. And I have another friend who has a video. They've never watched it once. So it's just those things that you don't, when you're planning, you think something seems so important. And then, anyway.
Just one quick thing. The one beautiful thing, and you mentioned this earlier too, around people focusing on the guest experience, but reimagining tradition particularly Gen Z hits marrying age is something that we're seeing right now. This is kind of the first or second year where Gen Z, that the first cohorts of Gen Z are getting married is going to be really interesting. And we're going to track it really closely to see how that comes in. But compared to millennials, just who were challenging norms and doing things, we saw Gen Z, we're really excited about seeing what Gen Z brings to the table in terms of, and this term reimagining traditions is the one that we're anchored on, because it'll be really fun to see kind of what they come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. They are a creative bunch. I will give them that. All right. So last question about the knot, and then we're going to do some little quick segments, like lightning round segments. So the last question about the knot is, what are some of your favorite tools that you offer to couples?
Our anchor product, and the one that I also, founded the company WeddingWire on, is our local marketplace. I think that is a phenomenal resource and tool. And again, the reason for being its existence is to truly help engaged couples connect with those best professionals out there and make a very confident purchase decision for the most important day of their life. And they can do that by finding pricing, finding availability, finding reviews, right? And everything that we need to do and empower them to assemble that best all-star team for their big day.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Some quick segments. The first one is called The Word. So what I want you to do is think of one word that would sum up the cost of planning a wedding.
Personal.
Yeah, it is personal. And then when you see the number, it ends up feeling very personal.
Personal in many different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Biting sometimes. Okay. An aha moment. Tell our listeners about the moment when you combined the knot and WeddingWire and knew that was the right decision.
That was about 5 years ago now. At that moment in time, I candidly, I don't know that I was, or even I'm sure still today to know that I'm qualified to lead any of this stuff. But I will tell you what served me well in my time as CEO of starting WeddingWire, 4 people in the living room all the way to where we are today, are 2 things. One is, number one, I've just really appreciated the opportunity to learn and grow over the last 20 years. And so for me, principles on being a leader are agility, hunger, big slice of humility all of the time. And the second aspect is, as I just look back and think about my tenure, surrounding yourself with good people. I know it sounds cliche, but I am so thankful to work with just an amazing team. They sort of help me be better as a leader every single day. And so even today, just what a thrill and joy to be able to work with such a great team.
That's a great answer. Okay, last thing, market mantras. This is, after all, an investing podcast. So this is really more of a personal question. But is there a mantra or principle that you use as a guiding factor when you manage your own money?
Yes. So one of the best pieces of career advice I ever got, someone told me, Tim, double down on your strengths. Like, don't spend that much time trying to fix your weaknesses, because on the best day, your weakness will be like not that great compared to someone where that's their strength. And so when it comes to investing, I'm not a good investor. I know that already. So my mantra is, I'm going to rely on the experts. Because that's their strength. I don't think I'm good at it. I might be an okay entrepreneur, but I'm not a good investor. So I'll happily leave it to the experts to help guide me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that works in coupledom too. So yes. For single people out there, make sure when you choose a partner, you understand what their strengths are and what your strengths are and how to complement those. And even in the wedding planning process, I mean, I'm in finance. My husband is an architect. So the floor plan of our reception was like down to the inch. He had blueprints. He knew how far apart each table was and where the chairs should be placed and where the vases should be on. I mean, it was so detailed. And I was like, yeah, we'll just put some flowers on the table. It'll be fine. Everybody will find it. But I am thankful for his organization and his visualization that way. I, on the other hand, had a very detailed spreadsheet about how this wedding would get paid for. Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a topic that is important to people, investors, non-investors alike, and this is something that many, many people will go through at some point in their lives. once, twice, maybe 3 times, for who knows how many times. But it is always going to be a big event. It's always going to be a personal event and something that probably costs people a lot of money. So it's worth talking about from an investing perspective. And I know I very much appreciated your perspective from the wedding side of things. So appreciate your time today. Thank you for all your insights. I thought it was great.
Thank you so much for having me, Liz.
Okay, well, I personally found that episode very interesting. Obviously, I just got married, so maybe that's why I found it very interesting. But I know that there are many people listening who either have had their own weddings, are maybe thinking about having a wedding. Maybe you're in the planning process right now, or at some point in the future you will be. So I think it's useful to think through all of this, no matter where you are in life. A few big takeaways. The first of which, I think it's easier said than done, but Tim talked a lot about prioritization and the idea of being able to prioritize the things that you'll remember the most. Those are the ones that are worth spending more on. And maybe it's so much as making a list of your priorities. What are the things that we will splurge on? What are the things that we won't? And this doesn't just go for weddings. This is for any big decision or any multifaceted decision. Prioritize the things that you'll remember the most or the things that you value the most. You don't have to do every single thing on the list. Second big takeaway, hire the professionals. And I think this probably goes without saying in some arenas, things that you maybe can't do for yourself. Perhaps you're not good at making a 3-tiered wedding cake. So hiring a professional for that, but even hiring the professionals in some of the things that you can technically do for yourself, but either don't want to, or it'll be a better experience if you let somebody do it who has all the experience. And then lastly, this is a takeaway that just sort of was a thread throughout our conversation. Technology has changed every industry. Weddings are no exception. And one of the big ways that it seems it's changed the wedding industry is that it's been able to make us more efficient. It's given us more information at our fingertips. We can find vendors easier. We can find reviews easier. We can plan easier. We can even reduce costs in a lot of places because of the advancements in technology. So I would urge people to use technology to your advantage, help it reduce your costs, and help it make you more efficient throughout the process. That's it for this episode. Thank you all for listening.